Canada, the true north, strong and free. In the late 1800s, the number of immigrants admitted annually to Canada varied between 6,300 and 133,000. Record numbers of immigrants were admitted in the early 1990s when we were promoting the settlement of Western Canada. The highest number ever recorded was in 1913, with more than 400,000 immigrants. Since the early 1990s, 235,000 new immigrants per year come to Canada in hopes of a new life. But how do Canadians feel about opening our borders? Here's one opinion by Dr. Jordan B. Peterson, a professor at the University of Toronto.
Why not just open the borders and let everybody come in? Well, the reason you don't do that is because a complex system cannot tolerate extensive transformation over too short a period of time. So if you stand up and say, look, let's be a little cautious. Let's make sure that we don't transform our society so rapidly that we lose what we have. Let's be careful about that. That doesn't mean that you're a morally reprehensible demon. It just means that you're conservative, and it's a reasonable position to hold. So there's no sense in apologizing.
But immigration is not as simple as wanting to open our borders or holding certain political ideologies. Rather, immigration solves a large monetary and physical issue for Canada. The boomers are retiring, and they're doing so rapidly. This is a time for them to put their feet up, indulge in the welfare system that they've been contributing to for their working lives. But what does this mean for the job market? Well, the boomers will be succeeded by Generation X, who only comprise of 60% of the size of the baby boomer population, leaving a 40% gap. This is what CTV had to say in 2016.
As demographers have pointed out, for the first time in Canada's history, there are more seniors over the age of 65 than there are children under the age of 15 in Canada. This week's federal budget by Canada's new government was largely about infrastructure spending, but what does that budget mean to Canada's seniors? Now, the government noted that too many seniors live in poverty, and it is becoming increasingly difficult to save enough before reaching retirement age.
So how do we solve all these issues and make up for the gap in the labor market? Well, the answer was immigration.
Short a period of time. Now, you want immigrants to come in, especially if they're the sorts of immigrants who are likely to contribute properly to the success of your polity, and lots of immigrants do that. I mean, I think the vast majority, for example, of entrepreneurs in the United States come from the Indian subcontinent. So great, bring them over. They're highly educated, they're extraordinarily productive, they make lots of new businesses, and then they pump money like mad back into India. Good deal.
Earlier, you saw Dr. Peterson criticize how immigration could radically change an economy, how it could radically change a country. And in the same video, he explains why immigration can be a source of economic growth. So how do we balance the concerns of parties on both sides of this argument? Well, the Canadian answer was a filter, and the filter was called the Canadian Point System. Chapter 11 of our textbook explains that there's 3 basic premises to immigrate to Canada, which are work experience, your minimum funds, and your minimum score. Now, your minimum score was dependent on 6 areas of point collection, and these came from language skill points, education points, work experience points, age points, whether or not you arranged employment in Canada, there was points for that, and points based on your adaptability. As per the Government of Canada's website, knowing English at the CLB level 9 or higher allots you 6 points in speaking, listening, reading, and writing. CLB stands for your Canadian language benchmark. If you achieve at least a CLB 5 in all 4 qualities in French, you can achieve an additional 4 points for a maximum of 28. Work experience allots you a maximum of 15 points. 6 or more years of work gives you 15, whereas 1 year gives you merely 9. In terms of age, the maximum point allotment is 12, which is achieved between ages 18 and 35. No points are achieved for people under 18, and there are decreasing returns to scale in terms of points with age as you get older. You can receive up to a maximum of 10 points if you have arranged employment in Canada. The job must be for at least 1 year, continuous paid or full-time work, and not seasonal. In addition, it must also fall under at least skill type 0, which are managerial jobs, skill level A, which are professional jobs, or skill level B, which are technical and trade occupations. You may also receive up to a maximum of 10 points for adaptability based on your or your spouse's language level, past studies in Canada, or past work in Canada, in addition to whether or not you have arranged employment in Canada and whether or not you have any relatives living within Canada. Now, education can allot you a maximum of 25 points. That's more points than if you knew perfect English. Now, if you went to a Canadian school and you have the certificate, diploma, or degree to prove it, you have no issue. But the problem is, when you have a foreign education, you must have an educational credential assessment report that approves your education and doesn't nullify it. Now, in figure 11.3, we've been noticing that the economically assessed immigrants have been increasing in numbers over the past 45 years. And an economically assessed immigrant is someone with high skills or a high level of education. And this is precisely the point we're trying to make in our presentation, that the Canadian point system is grossly skewed towards high skilled individuals or individuals with high education, even if there are not jobs for them waiting here and even if their education is nullified. Now, don't take my word for it. Here's one YouTuber who walks us through this very issue.
It's not real, the statistics is not real. I'll tell you from my experience what is more real. So there are three types of jobs, I would say. The one job that doesn't require any education, the second job it requires some education, and third jobs they need a lot of education like university degrees and masters and stuff like that. So the easiest and most in demand jobs, I would say a job in a warehouse. That was my temporary job. If you come here on a student visa, on work permit, probably not, because you have to be in a big category, but I'm not going to go through immigration process here. You have to get a skilled job. So these jobs that are in demand are not skilled ones.
The key existing arguments are that some Canadians feel strongly about the dangers of bringing low-skilled workers into their borders. They assume low-skilled workers will increase the crime rate, hijack neighborhoods, or increase the tax burden in terms of welfare, rather than alleviating the tax burden for aging boomers. As per the testimony in the previous video, and from this metric from Statistics Canada, we can see that the bulk of labor demand comes from low-skilled jobs. We have seen that the Canadian point system is set up in a way where it seems that we are in need of highly educated people. However, when these people arrive from different parts of the world, their educational attainment is nullified, and they are barred from entering the jobs that they have spent the better part of their youth preparing for. Accordingly, a large fraction of high-skilled workers must settle for low-skilled work, part-time jobs, and in some cases, employment insurance. Policymakers must consider two questions when evaluating what proper immigration policies should look like. The first being, what is the effect of the impact of immigrants on the Canadian market? And the second, how do immigrants fare in Canada? First, the existing system, which grossly favors high-skilled workers, asks high-skilled workers to enter Canada and accept low-skilled jobs or settle for employment insurance. If this employment insurance is not set up as a negative income tax, or rather has an implicit tax rate of 100%, there will be no incentive for said laborer to enter the labor market. Second, as you can see in figure 11.5 in this hypothetical assimilation profile of a 20-year-old immigrant, when we're looking at earnings on the Y and years since migration on the X, at year 0, there's an entry effect, a wedge between a native-born's earnings and an immigrant's earnings. This intersects at time T, and by the time both these people retire at age 65, the immigrant on average is making more than native born. Therefore, immigrating to Canada is still a good option for an immigrant. However, leveraging the fact that there is a higher demand for low-skilled labor will be in the best interest of immigrants. For this reason, we propose the following policy recommendation. In order for immigrants to take advantage of the high demand for low-skilled laborers, the Canadian point system must transform into a system that attracts low-skilled laborers. Accordingly, to change the favoritism the point system shows highly educated people, we would remove 5 points from the education criteria and add these points to the language criteria, because communicating with your employer or your colleagues is an important trait. Furthermore, we want to impose a 2-year probationary period which makes immigrants stay in the province they are assigned to. As such, if more workers are led into Canada to work on, let's say, Albertan oil rigs, they must stay there long enough to establish themselves to participate in the tax system. This phenomena is backed by data from Statistics Canada, where we see that a large sum of immigrants do not participate in outmigration of provinces. In closing, our policy prioritized inclusivity and attempted to equate the demand for labor within Canada with the supply of productive immigrants. Our policy took the Canadian approach to immigration as opposed to our southern neighbors in the United States. As a final thought, this clip of a press conference between President Trump and Prime Minister Trudeau explicates how the two countries differ on the immigration front. We hope you could have seen why changing the Canadian point system to favor low-skilled workers could be beneficial for Canada as a whole. Thank you for your time.
We're actually taking people that are criminals, very, very hardened criminals in some cases, with a tremendous track record of abuse and problems, and we're getting them out, and that's what I said I would do. I'm just doing what I said I would do when we won by a very, very large electoral college vote.
Canada has always understood that keeping Canadians safe is one of the fundamental responsibilities of any government, and that's certainly something that we're very much focused on. At the same time, we continue to pursue our policies of openness towards immigration and refugees without compromising security.